February 22nd marks 3 years to the day that Pokemon TCG Live first released in Canada. Coincidentally, that's the last time I remember feeling happiness. Over these last 3 years, TCG Live has found new low after new low, breaking for no reason, having numerous cards from each set be coded incorrectly, and then when the developer managed to do things intentionally, they introduced shop limits, removing the ability to properly credit farm. But I've got some great news. With the update given out just 4 days ahead of Live's 3rd birthday, the Pokemon Company introduced basic features that we've been begging for more than 1,000 days. And thus ends the original intro I wrote to this video. To everyone who says I complain about Live too much, first off, you're correct, but also know that I fully prepared to do a full video focused on all the positive changes they made to the game. Then the update actually came out, and not only did Live completely break, but they made another player-unfriendly change to the economy. And that's where we'll start, with the intentional badness this update introduced. I had to reread this thing about 10 times because it's worded so weirdly, and I'm still not sure I understand it correctly. But from what I can gather, starting with Journey Together on March 27th, you won't be able to craft hyper rare cards until 6 months after they come out. Yeah, you know that whole crafting thing I praised TCG Live for years, even when the game was an utter mess? Well, not only did they introduce shop limits a few months ago to make it worse, but now you have to wait 6 months after a hyper rare comes out to craft the damn thing now. If you're wondering why they did this, well, it's a secret. Seriously. They won't tell us why they're making this change until it actually happens on March 27th. All they said now is that they'll be closely monitoring this update to ensure it achieves our goals while keeping Live fun and welcoming for new and experienced players alike. We've theorized that this is just them laying even more groundwork for microtransactions. I mean, why would you make a completely free game worse for your players unless you hate your players? Well, considering that microtransactions still haven't been added, we can only assume they hate us. Now, this change isn't horrible. You can still use and craft the regular art versions of cards. This crafting ban only affects cards outside of the main set, which they're dubbing overnumbered cards. Essentially, it's just shiny rares, shiny ultra rares, and illustration rares. And you can still pull these cards from packs either bought in-game or redeemed through codes you got through physical packs. They also say overnumbered cards will be given away through gameplay promotions, challenges, the ranked ladder, the battle pass, and more. So it's not like you won't be able to get them. In fact, it'll probably be easier for newer players to get them since they're increasing the number they give away. Realistically, this only punishes the most dedicated players who've stuck with Live through the worst moments over the past 3 years and accumulated lots of crystals and credits. Trainer points and trade credits. And I mean, who cares about those people, right? To sum up my thoughts on this though, it's a horrible decision. If you want a specific hyper rare card from Journey Together, but it's not offered on the Battle Pass or pulled in a pack, you have to wait until September 27th to craft it. While it's not nearly as bad as them imposing shop limits, that's not exactly a glowing endorsement. Oh yeah, this terrible thing they did isn't as bad as that last terrible thing they did. Don't worry though, it gets much worse. Because now we come to the massive energy acceleration issues after this patch. Magneton and Archaludon EX were the first ones reported, but I've also seen people say Lapras EX, Gengar EX, Palkia V-Star, Scramble Switch, Heavy Baton, and more are affected. Hell, apparently you can knock out your own Pokemon regularly with Gardevoir EX's ability now. Basically, anytime you try to accelerate energy, typically from the discard pile, there's a good chance Live freezes up because it's a well-made game designed by people who know what they're doing. Thankfully, the biggest tournament of the year isn't happening this weekend, and people don't need to test Miraidon or Archaludon, two decks that definitely won't be featured heavily there. Oh wait, there is a major tournament this weekend? Yeah, thousands of people will be going to EUIC, and Live is the best way for people to test against other high-tier players. Because these cards are broken, now they can't. But it gets even better. The day after releasing the update, Live itself completely broke. Matchmaking went down first, then you just couldn't access the game. It would get stuck at 13 out of 46 when loading in, meaning you can't do anything. Yippee! The dev is calling this a matchmaking outage, and it's probably the reason why they haven't responded to the massive issues with energy accelerating cards, because they're so busy trying to get the game to actually work. A couple hours after that original announcement, they had to take Live offline for emergency updates. At this point, it's also worth mentioning that something like Switch Card is broken after the update as well. But since it's purely visual, I haven't really mentioned it because that kind of pales in comparison to, Live not working. As of making this recording, Live is back online, but none of the major card issues are addressed. And they still haven't even acknowledged them a day later. So despite doing hours of emergency maintenance, the major issue still persists. They only fixed the major issue. What's happening right now isn't anything new or unexpected. If you've watched any of my previous 30 PTCGL rant videos, I'll put a link to the playlist in the description, this is why it takes 3 years to add basic features. Because whenever they release an update adding or changing anything, something inevitably breaks. Then they have to spend weeks or months fixing them, which is time they should be spending improving the actual game. But it's all worth it. I mean, think of how much money the Pokemon Company is saving by not paying Direwolf to keep PTCGO online anymore. Okay, I'm done talking about how fitting it is that Live completely broke for its 3-year anniversary. Now I'll continue by talking about the positives using the part of the video I wrote before all this badness happened. If you've watched any of my previous rant videos about Live, you've likely seen this image. Ignoring all the embarrassing technical issues with Live, this compared the new game's features to those of the Pokemon trading card game online, which they shut down forever in June 2023. And there was no comparison. Live has just 2 game modes, one of which is still in beta and lacks several things that any competent card game would have, like muting emotes and a game log. We did finally get that game log after 2 years, but then nothing of substance happened for a year. This week, though, that all changed. It's tough to say which of the 4 or 5 new features is the best, but as someone who lived through the era of avatars constantly being on screen, staring at you and breathing heavily while you couldn't tell what their hands were doing, muting emotes is at the top of my list. If you're facing off against someone who constantly emote spams because they think you can't do anything about it, well, after 3 long years, you can finally do something about it. Once you load into a match, simply click on the mute icon on the left side of the screen. I'm not a huge fan of it always being there and wish it was tucked inside the emote wheel, but no longer will you be annoyed by someone endlessly giving you a sarcastic thumbs up during your turn. Another PTCGO feature we've waited 3 years to arrive in Live is the ability to remove match timers in friend battles. I've already seen people talk about how this will make coaching better, but it's also useful for friends learning how to beat each other off and need time to get the hand movements down correctly. To remove match timers, all you do is go to your friends list, challenge them to a batter, and click turn off timers. That's it. Once you load into the battle, the timers will be stuck at 39 minutes like when you're facing the AI, and they'll never count down. If you haven't played Live in a year or so, they did fix the issue where you had to restart the game after adding someone to your friends list. Yeah, that was an actual thing in this game for 2 years. If you didn't freaking restart Live, you wouldn't be able to get any benefits from your new friends. Speaking of friends, you can spend $5 per month on Twitch to be mine. Also, while you can't do the actual thing you want to do after a battle and look at your opponent's deck list like you could on PTCGO, Live does have the other after battle feature PTCGO had, adding someone as a friend. If adding friends in real life was as simple as clicking a button, I wouldn't be so lonely, but in Live, just wait until the match ends, then click the add friend button. Then check your friends list right after and get sad when their name doesn't appear because it means they rejected you. Then we come to automatic final prizes. It was beyond annoying that TCG Live didn't have the capacity to realize the game was over, resolving final prizes without the need of a human. But after 3 years, it's finally learned what PTCGO already did. As someone who only ever wins, this will save me so much time because it means I can start lotioning my toes even sooner, since I won't have to worry about slippery fingers on my mouse while my opponent thinks I'm BMing them by not taking my final prizes even though the game's over. Hilariously, the final prize cards are just kind of thrown at you as fast as possible. It's not a safe, gentle, oh congratulations, here's your last 2 prize cards, buddy. It's more like, here you go, here they are, take them now, we don't want them anymore, why are you still here, move on, go away, leave me alone, ah! And finally, click to place. This one's a great accessibility feature. For 3 years, you had to click and drag cards and damage counters. Now, for example, you can click an energy card in your hand, then click a Pokemon, and it will attach that energy. My boomer brain is fried from playing Live for 1,000 days, but I recall PTCGO having the same feature, except the card would also move when you move the mouse. Live doesn't do that though. Overall, click to place is a great improvement to Live on PC and Mac. It removes the annoyance of always having to drag your cards and can make things feel snappier. Of course, they couldn't implement it perfectly. Because of the new highlight animations, you can't really tell which Pokemon are selected when using something like TM Evolution, and when you click on a card now, it does this weird headache-inducing bounce and jiggle every single time, just like a Miltank's udders when I tickle its hooves. Similarly, the color of prize cards hurts my brain. It's not as bad as the flashbang Live had when it first came out, but it's still not great. Oh, and I absolutely hate how when you go to search your deck, the highlights appear first, then the cards load in a second later. The news post about click to place also mentions that you can now hover the mouse over tools and energy cards on the battlefield to read them. Again, this is another feature PTCGO had. Considering how many times I've said that in this video, it really makes you wonder why they shut down PTCGO just to make live into PTCGO 0.5. Also, they've improved damage counter placement, sort of. When using someone like Dragapult EX or Sableye or Raichu with my busted expanded deck, you had to click and drag every single damage counter and place them manually. Now you can just click the Pokemon you want to damage. Big W, so long as you only want to damage one Pokemon. You see, the click to place damage counters defaults to 10 damage at a time, so you can click super fast on one Pokemon and it's done easily. But if you want to spread the damage counters around like they're cheats, it's worse. Moving to the higher numbers requires you to click them twice, then you have to click the Pokemon, and it's a bit of a chore. So yeah, it's better in most respects, but I still can't say they nailed it. For a normal functional game, I don't think I could give Click to Place 1.0 a passing grade. For TCG Live though, this is one of the greatest additions they've ever made. Along with the new features, there were also some bug fixes. It's nothing too exciting. Apparently Espeon EX's Amazes put Pokemon on top of your opponent's deck instead of shuffling them in. There's also a couple of soft lock fixes, and for new players, you shouldn't have to deal with the issue where the Battle the Professor quest would show up after the tutorial and just always be stuck there. I guess I should also briefly mention this. With yesterday's update, you can no longer play live on Android devices with 2 GB of RAM or less. According to them, by doing this, we are able to streamline our development process and focus resources on supporting newer operating systems and technologies. So yeah, that's a thing. Last year, the Pokemon Company decided to start a known issues thread on the forum for TCG Live. It was massive and featured several annoying glitches that have been around for years. But now in 2025, surely they fixed most of them, right? Yeah, you should know never to get your hopes up when it comes to this game. The only real update they've made to the known issues page in the last few months is mentioning that they screwed up the distribution of the Evolution sleeves for the event. They were supposed to be given away for the entirety of Eevee's Prismatic Parade, but instead only people who logged in during that first week got them. Otherwise, it's still a super long list that features years-long issues like the deck select glitch that sometimes won't let you take a card you need. Oh, and the known issues also mentions the Premium Pass still, even though that was removed from the game last year. So it really shows how closely they're paying attention to the known issues page. Good or bad, after all these additions, it's finally time to update the PTCGL features image. Yeah, even with this patch, Live is still lagging behind PTCGO quite a bit. No matter how exciting these improvements are, none of it's really new. The PTCGL dev didn't have to put any thought into them. They literally just looked at PTCGO, saw some things that could easily be implemented, and added them. It just further adds to the nonsensicalness of shutting down PTCGO in the first place to make room for an inferior game. I've said this numerous times, but PTCGO should have been the starting point, not the 5-year plan. We're 3 years into Live's existence, and one of its 2 game modes is still in beta. To make matters worse, they've seemingly completely abandoned Expanded. We haven't heard anything about it in months, and they've removed any mention of it from the in-game news section. Because nothing's changed with Expanded in 3 years, we still can't beat off our friends in this neutered format. As a result of no expanded friend battles, Gym Leader Challenge can't exist in Live, even though the Pokemon Company recognizes it as an unofficial official format. Live's also missing in-game tournaments. I can't really blame them because we're still dealing with that deck select glitch where certain cards just can't be selected, costing people wins because they can't grab the card they need when they need it. The lack of a collection viewer means you can't look at your cards unless you go to build a deck. And something I always find hilarious about Live is when you click on Show Not Owned and the game still shows you cards you own because it counts arts you don't own of cards you already own as not owned. So if you're missing one card from a master set but you don't know which one it is, you have to scroll through every card and look until you spot a 0. Because Live is a well-made game. While it's not a huge deal since you can peek at the game log to see who's going first, there's still no other way to tell who's going first if you blink during the coin flip. Maybe if Live kept the coin on the field like PTCGO did, PTCGO also kept deck boxes on the field, then we could tell based on that. But then I guess it might take space away from the cosmic toilet known as the Lost Zone, so okay, I agree. We can't have the deck box or the coin on the field. That makes complete sense. I know I ranted some more at the end here, and that was intentional. You only watch these videos to see my blood pressure rise because maybe one day I'll have a heart attack on stream and you can say, I was here in chat when it happens. Despite some of these positive improvements to Live, I've always said that I won't give it the benefit of the doubt until it's at least on par with PTCGO when it was shut down. And 3 years later, it's almost halfway there. Oh, and if this video gets 100 likes, I'll buy the PTCGL hoodie from the Pokemon Center, thus becoming the first person in the world to spend money on live. My Pokeballs are in your beach court.